Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. I'm speaking to you Monday afternoon, June 5th. We're going to call this week 4 and 4A for Political Science 1013 for the fall 2023 term. I'm only going to do one announcement this week. We won't do the midweek announcement because the exam is coming up on Thursday. So we roll both of our announcements into one for this week and call this the video for weeks 4 and 4A for 1013 for the summer term. The main news of the week, everybody, since I last spoke to you, has been the agreement to raise the debt ceiling. That was just coming to fruition, I believe, last time I spoke to you. Now the legislation has been passed by the House and by the Senate, and the President has signed it into law. Friday evening, early Friday evening, the President made a speech, nationally televised from the Oval Office, that was announced at fairly short notice. I was not able to get an announcement out about it in advance, but we are going to offer an extra credit assignment based on that you'll have to do after the fact. Of course, these days, video of such things will be available practically immediately after they're finished, and that's the case with the June 2nd speech by President Biden, just as much as for any recent presidential address. Okay, so 5 points available if you would like to look at that and summarize what you think are the most important things about it in a paragraph or two. I've already gotten a couple of assignments in about that. Okay, so modern technology, of course, it allows us to do things like this after the fact, after the speech has been given. There's video available, I'm sure, all over YouTube and all over the internet in general of the speech. I sent you a link that comes from ABC News that was posted to YouTube, and that and many, many others would suffice for this assignment. All right, so 5 points available if you would like to do that assignment. The exam is coming up this Thursday the 8th. That's our second exam, our midterm exam. It will cover units 3 and 4 on the media and the Constitution. 3 readings have been assigned in addition to the class notes and the textbook chapters on the media and the Constitution. There was an article about lack of trust in the media in America compared to other countries around the world. That was from the Liberal Patriot website. It's a lengthy article from the Atlantic Monthly by Professor Danielle Allen about race and slavery and the Constitution. And I hope you'll find her views interesting. She's a professor at Harvard University. That's the lengthiest of the readings that we have. Now, the third and final reading can be related to an announcement that I sent out. The list of supplementary material I always try to send out, the one called Unit 4 Links. What I put in that announcement was some links to some video material that would be of interest to students and really to everybody in case you ever have an encounter with law enforcement, which may happen to just about all of us on the highway, if nowhere else. Okay. Now, the reading from the New York Times by Mr. Manju deals with the recent incident that many of you might have heard about involving actor Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin was on a film set. The film called for him to fire a weapon. He fired the weapon thinking it was loaded with blanks. It turned out to be loaded with live ammunition, and someone was killed. Alec Baldwin got in trouble. The article you're reading mentions that he went ahead and talked to the police, and it suggests that maybe he shouldn't have. Okay, so that's related to the things that are talked about, the material from the Flex Your Rights organization that are discussed in the video links included in the Unit 4 links announcement. So as you read that piece by Mr. Manju, you might want to take a look at some of that material that I sent out, that I linked to in the Unit 4 links announcement, something everybody needs to be aware of so that they can protect and assert their constitutional rights. All right, so 3 articles there. Expect 10 or 15 items on those 3 articles altogether on the exam. And also the Unit 3 and 4 class notes. And I hope you will also look at the assigned textbook chapters, but mainly the class notes. We talked about Unit 3 already. It was a short unit on the mass media. We had begun talking to you about the Constitution unit. We mentioned the beginning of that unit discusses the events leading up to the Constitutional Convention. All right. What do we do after that? Well, we then try to go through the Constitution in some detail. Not everything. There are 7 articles and I believe 27 amendments. We don't discuss every single one of the amendments. We do try to go through the original 7 articles in some detail, and also the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments. Now, we also try to talk about the thinking behind the Constitution. We talk a little bit about our inheritance from English constitutionalism and from the ancient Greeks before that. And we also discuss the Federalist Papers. Federalist Papers numbers 10 and 51 by James Madison, the father of the Constitution, are in the appendix to your textbook. I hope you will try to take some time to read through those. If you find it difficult, what I say about them in the class notes will serve as kind of a study guide. So look at the class notes as you try to take a look at Federalist Papers numbers 10 and 51, and I hope that will be helpful to you. But those are important documents that are in your textbook right next to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, because Madison tells us a good deal about why the Constitution is the way it is, and why it includes some of the features that it does, what he was trying to achieve, along with the other delegates to the Constitutional Convention in the Constitution. All right, so we go through the original 7 articles and the Bill of Rights. We then go on to talk about the amendments that were added after the Civil War, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, especially the 14th Amendment, which changes the Constitution in some important respects, so you need to be sure that you are aware of that. We also include some material about the 25th Amendment, okay, because some provisions of the 14th and the 25th Amendments came up in relation to the impeachment proceedings against President Trump. The first time around when he was still in office, and the second time just after he had left office. Okay? So take a look at the 25th Amendment material in that connection especially. The 25th Amendment was added after the assassination of President Kennedy. It makes provision, it was feared that although President Kennedy died pretty much immediately, it was feared he might have lingered for a while as an invalid, and so it would be helpful to be able to designate the vice president as acting president. Okay, so some of those provisions, along with some provisions of the 14th Amendment, came up in the impeachment proceedings against Trump. So you'll see that as you read through the class notes, so pay some attention to that. Now, the rest of the class notes deal with civil rights, civil liberties, and federalism. There's one chapter in the textbook about each of those topics. We treat them fairly briefly in the class notes. I mentioned to you, if you press for time, look at Chapter 2 most closely. It is about the Constitution as a whole. But we do discuss civil liberties, civil rights, and federalism in the class notes. So take at least a brief look at those textbook chapters, if you can, along with the material in the class notes. Now, federalism refers to the relation between the national government, the feds, and the states. Okay, we have more than one level of government. That's the way a federal system works. So what is the relation between the two? Well, in your and my lifetime, going back to the time of President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1930s and 40s, more responsibilities have been shared between the feds and the states than in the past, when government functions might have been more absolutely separate. And we talk about how those functions are shared in several different areas of policy, and I'm sure that's discussed in your textbook chapter as well. Regarding civil rights and civil liberties, be sure to pay close attention to the distinction between the two. There's a chapter in your textbook about each, civil liberties and civil rights. Freedom of speech would be an example of a civil liberty. The right not to be discriminated against for various reasons would be considered a civil right. Now, one thing I do talk about to a fair extent in the class notes is civil liberties, and especially freedom of speech, because a number of controversies have arisen in just the past couple of years about freedom of speech. There's a fair amount of disagreement about just how far our right to freedom of speech ought to go. And some of this has happened since the pandemic, even just within the past few months since the first of the year of 2023. So look at that. You may have heard something about some of these cases. They're all highly controversial and acrimonious, and I hope it'll be of some interest to you to read about all that. All right, so that is the material for the exam. Units 3 and 4 on the media and the Constitution, plus 3 outside readings to which you've been sent links. And expect 10 or 15 items on the exam on those. Should be a similar format to the first exam. Mostly true, false, some multiple choice over units 3 and 4, the class notes, and the 3 assigned readings. Okay. Try those links. If you cannot get the articles to come up, or if you run into a paywall, contact me. I'll be happy to get that material to you before the exam. So we won't do a midweek announcement this week. We'll talk to you again this coming weekend, along about, let's see, Sunday the 11th or so. And then we will be moving into the exam 3 material. We begin with the presidency. So the exam will be Thursday, unit 3 and 4 plus the outside reading. So I hope you will have good luck on the exam. If you wish, get that extra credit assignment in. And we'll talk to you about a week from now at this time.